Grand Moff Tarkin is one of the most important figures in the Empire in Star Wars history, and I'm more convinced than ever that Lucasfilm's hiding one of Andor Season 2's biggest secrets, his return.
Most unfortunate about the security breach on Jeddah, Director Krennic.
Not only would he fit seamlessly into the story, there's also been some things said and done in recent months that have caught my attention, which leads me to believe his involvement isn't just possible, it's actually likely.
What a swell party this is.
We all know Tarkin went down with the first Death Star, but what if there's a few more stories still to be told?
Fear will keep the local systems in line.
Before we jump in, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on today's video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to catch more Star Wars and Andor Season 2 content, you're in the right place. Now with all that out of the way, let's dive into Tarkin's return in Andor Season 2 and how it makes perfect sense.
We stand here amidst my achievement, not yours!
I'm afraid the recent security breaches have laid bare your inadequacies as a military director.
So here's the deal, Andor Season 2 is leading straight into Rogue One, and if there's one Imperial who I think we all agree has to be involved in that transition, it's Grand Moff Tarkin. Now, in case you need a refresher, Tarkin wasn't just some high-ranking officer, he pretty much ran the day-to-day of the Empire. You had Palpatine scheming in the shadows and Vader pretty much doing whatever Palpatine told him to, so it was Tarkin that was largely running the Empire's military operations. Anyway, between 4BBY and 0BBY, which is exactly where Andor takes place, he was one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. But here's where things get interesting, because the seeds of his return were actually planted all the way back in Season 1 without anyone realising it. You remember Cassian's whole Nakina 5 storyline?
I'd rather die trying to take them down.
Yeah, where it turned out he was unknowingly helping build the Death Star, which would one day end up killing him, but I digress. The thing is, the Empire's going through extreme lengths to keep this thing a secret, and Tarkin would absolutely be involved in that. I mean, Rogue One literally shows him stealing the Death Star project from Krennic, and with Season 2 confirming Krennic's going to be back, it kind of makes sense for him to be in it as well, where we can actually see the early stages of Tarkin starting to maneuver Krennic out of power, and if we're being real here, that man was ruthless. If Andor explores the Empire silencing anyone who knows too much about Project Stardust, which was the codename for the Death Star, Tarkin could be the one we see ordering mass cover-ups and purges to ensure the project stays secret, and we'll talk about purges more in a moment. But anyway, let's talk about the ISB for a second, because Season 1 made it very clear that the Empire's intelligence division is stepping up its game.
Well played.
Thank you, sir.
Watch your back.
Dedra Meero and Major Pargaz were already a little more brutal than they needed to be when it came to cracking down on rebellion, but as things escalate in Season 2 and as we move closer to Rogue One, naturally Tarkin would be the one they report to. So if Tarkin does actually show up in Season 2, what does that mean for the story? Well, this is where things get a little dark, because there's one event in Star Wars history that perfectly sums up why he was so feared, and we already know that event's going to play a huge role in the season. So we know Andor Season 2 is setting up some major moments that lead directly into Rogue One, but there's one event in particular that stands out. One that might just be the most brutal act of Imperial cruelty we've ever seen in live action, because if you thought Alderaan was bad, wait until you see what actually goes down on Gorman. Now, I know Star Wars has a lot of dark moments, but the event known as the Gorman Massacre is next level. Basically, there was a peaceful protest being carried out on the planet in response to the Empire's heavy taxations and economic restrictions, but this was no means part of the rebellion. It was just a bunch of citizens trying to stand their ground. Now, in Legends, Tarkin personally ordered the massacre, going as far to have an Imperial warship land on a crowd and crush them to death, all just to make a point. As I said, this guy's brutal, literally has no chill, and here's the thing, this wasn't an act of war. As I said, these weren't soldiers, they were unarmed civilians protesting Imperial policies, so yeah, the message that the Empire's sending here is pretty obvious. It wasn't just about killing people, it was a warning to anyone else thinking of resisting the Empire, that this is what will happen. Now, Andor's already started to show us just how ruthless the Empire can be, but the Gorman Massacre is honestly on a different level. And if Andor follows this storyline, this could be the moment that truly cements Tarkin as one of the most terrifying figures in the galaxy. So why does this matter for Season 2? Well, it's already confirmed that Andor will depict the massacre for the first time in live action over 5 episodes. So it's appearing in just under half of them. And the way the show handles this could go one of two ways. The first would be that Andor stays true to Legends and we see Tarkin directly involved, perhaps even ordering the massacre. Well, the other option would be for the ISB, maybe someone like Dedra Meero orders it, only to be revealed later that they were following orders from Tarkin. There's no way they could do this event without his fingerprints being all over it. Anyways, this is where things start to take a turn, as the massacre also changes everything for Mon Mothma. Up until now, she's been playing the political game.
There will
will be a fact-finding commission put in place.
Trying to oppose the Empire from the inside, but the massacre marks the end of that. It's the moment she realises there's no reform in the Empire, it has to be fought. This is the moment that pushes her to fully break from the Empire and openly support the formation of the Rebel Alliance. And just think, if Andor gives us a scene of Mon first learning about the massacre, realising diplomacy is dead, that could be one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the entire show. So now we've got Season 2 setting up one of the darkest moments in Star Wars, an event that could establish Tarkin's role in shaping the Empire's brutality. But here's where things get really interesting. So far we've established that Andor Season 2 is tackling some of the darkest moments in Imperial history, and if there's one guy who has to be involved, it's Tarkin. The Gorman Massacre alone practically screams his name. Now here's where things take a pretty wild turn, because it's not just what's happening in the show, there's actually some bits going on behind the scenes. Something that might have already confirmed his return, and Lucasfilm really doesn't want you to know about it. Now we all remember Rogue One bringing Tarkin back through CGI.
What's unfortunate about the security breach on Jeddah, Director Krennic?
Where they digitally recreated Peter Cushing's likeness with a sprinkle of motion capture, and at the time it was groundbreaking, whereas now it's a lawsuit. Yeah, I kid you not, Lucasfilm is currently being sued over their use of Tarkin's likeness, with some small company that Peter Cushing apparently signed over the rights to just before he passed. They're arguing that Lucasfilm never had full permission to use his face. Now this all came to light towards the end of 2024, so you're probably thinking, well, why now? 8 years after Rogue One released. Yeah, I think it's suspicious as well. Like, think about it. If Lucasfilm wasn't working on Tarkin again, why would the lawsuit suddenly be an issue? Unless you've got the owner of the company going through his desk looking for a way to make a quick buck, why would you wait almost a decade to start a legal fight? And here's the real kicker, Lucasfilm has tried to get this case dismissed twice and failed both times. If this was a nothing lawsuit, they could have just settled it quietly, but no, they're fighting hard to make sure it doesn't get in the way of whatever they've got planned. And let's be real, if they weren't working on Tarkin right now, why would they be so desperate to win this case? Every other project they've got going on doesn't remotely come into the scope of Tarkin.
Fear will keep the local systems in line.
Apart from Andor. Does this mean we're absolutely guaranteed to see Tarkin return in Season 2? Not necessarily, but there's a few ways this could play out. They could have already digitally recreated Tarkin, and that could explain why the lawsuit's happening now. Suspiciously close to the release of Andor Season 2, you know, the show that ties directly into Rogue One. Perhaps Lucasfilm approached the other company this time, or word got out they're about to do the same thing they did in 2016, and the little company wanted to cash in on it. Or if Lucasfilm loses the case, and we've had no word on the outcome so far, by the way, they might be forced to recast Tarkin with a live actor instead of using CGI. Either way, this lawsuit could change the way they bring Tarkin back, and Andor Season 2 could be the moment it's revealed. Anyway, at this point, the Empire is fully locking down its grip on the galaxy, and if there's one person pulling the strings from behind the scenes, it's going to be good old Tarkin. We've already spoke about how Andor could be setting up by the Gorman Massacre and this conveniently timed lawsuit. But if he's actually in the show, what does it mean for the larger story? Well, that's where things get really interesting, because we already know the ISB's up in their game this time around. We've seen Miro, Partagaz, and the whole Imperial Security Bureau tightening their grip on the pockets of rebellion that are springing up.
The ISB will be taking the lead going forward.
But it's really Tarkin that's behind the fear-based rule of the Empire. And if the ISB at this point are waging an all-out war on rebel cells, it makes sense that it's Tarkin there giving the final orders. So yeah, his presence could completely change the stakes, because we're no longer just dealing with ISB officers trying to climb the ranks, we're seeing the full force of Imperial rule being executed at the highest level. But that's only part of the story. Here's where things start to line up with Rogue One. So we already know that Cassian was unknowingly helping build the Death Star on Nakina 5. We had that cool post-credits scene at the end of the season to confirm it. Now, if Season 2 explores how the Empire keeps that project a secret, Tarkin would absolutely be the one making sure no one talks, and let's not forget, Director Krennic's also returning too, so what does this mean? It means we can actually see the beginning of that Krennic and Tarkin rivalry that blossomed, if that's the right word for it, in Rogue One. This could be the time where we see him starting to take power away from Krennic, setting up what happens in Rogue, where Tarkin takes full control of the Death Star, literally giving the go-ahead to fire upon Scarif with it right where Krennic was. But here's the big question, if Tarkin is involved, how far are Andor willing to go to show just how brutal he really is? Because his presence could set the stage for the Empire's biggest power plays yet. So by now we've established just how much of the power move Tarkin could be making, overseeing the ISB crackdown, silencing Death Star leaks, and manoeuvring Krennic out of the way. Think about it, Tarkin isn't just some high-ranking Imperial, he's literally the guy that goes on to take full control of the Death Star project. But here's the thing, when Rogue One begins, Krennic is still running the show. He's the one overseeing the final test on Jeddah, and he still thinks he's in charge.
We stand here amidst my achievement!
But what Andor Season 2 could show us is how Tarkin slowly moves in to take that power away from him, and there's something else Andor might explore. The end of the Imperial Senate, Tarkin could play a huge role in officially dismantling the Senate, which would lead to that line in A New Hope.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us.
If Andor builds up to that moment, it could be the final transformation of the Empire from a regime still pretending to have political order to a full-on dictatorship ruled by fear. But there's one last lingering question. If Tarkin is going to come back, then how are Lucasfilm going to do it? Because that lawsuit we mentioned earlier, that could take a CGI Tarkin off the table. Now there is a possibility Lucasfilm won the lawsuit, and in that case we would see CGI just like in Rogue One, but much better with how technology has evolved since then.
You may fire when ready.
And I know there's a lot of backlash with CGI characters, but I think this is actually the better option than recasting in this case, because look, outside of Andor, there's not much need to use the character again in live action. All of the stories they've got planned now happen away from this part of the timeline. So why, for what would probably be a cameo or just light use, would they now bring in a different face completely when Tarkin's been, for the most part, Peter Cushing since 1977? But that's just me. If Tarkin was to return, do you think they should go down the CGI route again or recast the character completely? As always, drop your thoughts, theories, and wilder speculations down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our Andor Season 2 Kino Lawyer one. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming stuff. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.